Um, Let me welcome everyone to tonight's episode of Candid Conversations. My name is Willson, and I'm your host, and I'm glad to have you guys joining. Now, in case you are joining us for the first time, Candid Conversations is a podcast where we talk about faith and how it intersects with our world. And today we are talking about hope, and we're going to be talking about how do you overcome disappointments and how do you keep your hope up during a difficult time. And I'm sure most of you would agree with me that we're living in crazy times, and it's so difficult to keep your hope and to deal with the disappointment that seems to be popping up every day from every angle. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And to help us do this, we are joined by a good friend of mine. She's amazing. Don't let her fool you by faking some humility. She's amazing. She's like great. We're joined by Theo Chapeta. Theo is a radio personality. She's spiritual, mental, and emotional health enthusiast, and she's an amazing teacher as well. So it's been a pleasure knowing Theo for a while now, and I'm so excited to finally have her joining Candid Conversations. I've been trying to get her on the show actually, and finally we have her on the show. So Theo, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good to have you. Maybe let me give you a minute just to introduce yourself a little bit better than I did, and then we will jump into today's conversation.
Sure. I feel like you've said most of the things. Maybe let me clarify on the radio personality. I think I'm a broadcaster at heart. I fell in love with broadcasting back in college, and it was my major anyway. So I haven't done full-time broadcasting in maybe 2 years now. But yeah, radio personality is still, I guess, something that follows me around still. But yeah, I love everything spiritual, mental, emotional health. Because I think I'm a big believer in if our insides aren't okay, then our outsides are quite useless sometimes. So yeah, I believe in that a lot. And so part of my own striving is for me to get better mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, but also to help others.
Great. Um, Thanks to you for that. Seems like your connection just went a little bit bad, but yeah. So I just want to maybe give an overview of this conversation, and just pick up from where we were last time, because 2 weeks back in our last episode we had a chat around mental health, and man, it was an amazing conversation. We've received so much great feedback around that, and I think our conversations really centered around how do we take care of ourselves. Self-care is really a critical thing during such difficult times. And I think over the past few months, I think one of the things that I personally have had to deal with has been around, um, balancing up the expectations that I had for the year, and the dreams, the hopes that I had with this new reality. And obviously, I think there is a lot of disappointment that is set in, because probably haven't done as much as I wanted to. So many things are not going the way I wanted them to. So this is something that I personally have been struggling with around how do I handle all this, and just feeling like God has let me down. I don't know if you guys have ever been in that space where you kind of just feel like, but God, where are you in all this? Why is this happening to me? And and I think for me the other thing was, what made it difficult was seeing other people, and they seem not to be having the same challenges as I'm having. And then I'm thinking, are we living in the same world? So handling all of that has just been really a challenge. But of late, I've been getting this sense of hope rising, and these are conversations I've been having with a number of friends around how we are sensing that. I think in this time that there is a challenge for hope to rise, for us to really engage and feel hopeful again, start hoping again for the best, So I've been trying to balance those two scenarios and really, come to a place where we sort of establish a premise for navigating during these difficult times. So this is really where this conversation is coming from. And Theo, I know we've had a couple of side chats around this as well. And last week, actually, let me let you guys on a secret. Last Sunday, we were in church and Theo was praying actually. And when she was praying, she started praying that we would find healing and healing from the pain of the disappointments of this year. And I really connected with that because there's just been so much disappointment. So we're going to talk about that as well towards the end around how do we find healing. But I want us to kickstart the conversation. Let me bring Theo into the chat. And Theo, maybe just start off with talking to us about how you've managed to really balance the expectations maybe that you had for the year and the reality that we find ourselves in. How do you overcome the disappointment and keep your hope, navigating through this difficult time? So yeah, let me hand over to you, Theo, to come in.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like I haven't done a good job, which has been it felt like quite ironic, I would say, that you said, hey, let's do this talk about hope, because of that particular thing I said in a prayer. And I remember saying to my friend this morning that I basically said that prayer a little half-heartedly, only because this is the season that I'm in, of having to deal with disappointment. And I think, like you said, of when the year was starting, many of us had plans, and I had a lot of plans of like, oh, this is how this year's gonna go. This is what I want to do. I want to do A, B, C, D, E. But 3 months in, and everything seems to be falling apart. And I think by the 4th month, I started falling apart. So it's been really difficult, the past 3-4 months, I would say, trying to keep that hope alive. Honestly, I think there was a point where I actually said I've given up on hope. I've given up trying to hope for anything, because if I looked into the future, it didn't look inviting, it didn't look nice, it didn't look like there was anything for me there. So I basically was starting to give up and was just like, you know what, just do as go as the day goes, but really it doesn't feel like there is actually anything for me here. It doesn't feel like there is anything to look forward to, anything to be around. But I think the best thing that has happened to me during this time is actually having that thought of like, I'm done being hopeful. I'm done trying to find hope rather than being hopeful. But like, I'm done trying to find hope, because I feel like somehow that liberated me in a way. It's a very weird, I think, thing that I've been going through, where because I said that I'm quite done with trying to find hope or hoping for things or trying to look into the future or trying to create something new for myself or trying to find a different way out of my circumstances, I think it opened me up to accepting that I am actually in a hopeless situation. It brought me to a point where I could actually accept and say, hey, I'm not in a hopeful place. I don't feel hope. I don't feel like there's anything for me. I don't feel hopeful at all. I don't feel like God is here. I don't feel like he's doing anything. I think that that particular me stopping and saying, you know what, I'm done with hope, kind of some weird way made my mind start to really get to a point of accepting the reality on the ground. And I think that's been a real big thing for me the past couple of months, of just really accepting this is the situation I'm in. This is the place I'm in. This is the place of hopelessness where I haven't felt like I'm going to do anything. It doesn't feel like I'm going to achieve anything. It doesn't feel like I'm going to go anywhere. And that somehow has sparked back up just a little more hope. Me accepting my situation kind of cleared my mind to be able to say, hey, I can go somewhere. I can do something with kind of the situation that I have. It helped me have a more clear mind, if that makes any sense, a more clear mind as to how I can actually move ahead and go ahead. So yeah, I think that's been the big thing for me, accepting the situation on the ground, accepting where my mind is at, where my heart is at, where me and God are at. That, I think that's been really the big thing for me.
Wow, I think you say something very profound. And it's a paradox in a sense, just the thought around finding hope after choosing to stop looking for hope. I think there's something so powerful about that because I mean I'm also trying to relate it to my personal situations as well, and I've often found that when I'm striving for something, when I'm trying to get something, I it's easy to fall into this trap of I want to do it in my own strength, and it then becomes about me doing whatever it takes to get that. And I often find that when I'm in that mode, I sort of, relegate Jesus out of the whole equation. It then becomes about me and whatever thing that I want to get, and me trying to figure out on my own, trying to show that I can actually do this on my own. So I think there's something really powerful about letting go in order to find what you're looking for. Because ultimately, my belief is that hope is a person. Just as we talk about how Jesus is truth, I really also do believe that hope is not just a thing, it's really the person of Jesus. And I was reading Psalm 42, verse 5, which talks about have hope in God. And I think there's so many examples where the Bible talks about that, putting your hope in Jesus. We have this unshakable hope. This hope is an anchor to our soul, and it gives all these beautiful analogies. But the more I think about it, the more I'm convinced that it's not just about putting your hope in Him. It's really about finding Him to be the ultimate hope, to be my hope. Because I mean, if you put your hope, if you put something in something, you can take it out.
Yeah.
So and I find that's where the problem for me is, because I can't do that anymore. I can't be placing my hope in Him, and then because I can take it out. And my thinking and my mode is now being, you know what, the only way this is gonna work is if you become my hope, and I trust you. I just, you become my hope. So yeah, and I thought that was really powerful for you to say that. And I think it kind of guides us into the next thing that I wanted us to talk about as well. The balance between having hope or faith, in an expectation, and having hope, or having Jesus as your hope. Because oftentimes I've found as well that, there's so many times that I wake up and I'm hoping for something to happen, right? And I find that along the way, I become so obsessed with that expected outcome that I lose sight of everything else. And I don't think that's a healthy hope. I don't know if there's anything like healthy hope,
Yeah.
but it then becomes this obsession that you have with, I want this to work. And then I find that if that thing doesn't happen, if that expectation is not met, I fall into this big cycle of depression, of even anger sometimes, like, why
Yeah.
did this happen, so yeah, let's talk about that. What does it mean to have Jesus as your hope
Yeah.
versus having your hope or your expectation in an anticipated outcome?
Hmm. I think I can tell the story of me at the beginning of the year. So actually, end of last year, um, I was going through a transitional period where I was actually trying to figure out if I'm continuing with the work I'm doing or is something else coming along. And I remember during that time, last year, December, Pastor Mike Todd of Transformation Church did I think it was a 19 episode series of faith. And part of it right at the end was kind of declaring certain things that um, you are believing God for. Like 2020, I'm believing in God for this, and that. And so that was kind of part of the thing. Um, and so I had, believed in that and was like, yes, I have plans for 2020. And with this transition, I believe God is doing this, and that in my life. And I wrote all those things down and definitely believed them and was like, yes, this is actually happening. 2020, this specific things are going to happen. And by the time March came along, all of those things, like I said before, started crumbling down. It was one by one little things that just started to fall apart. But because I was like, no, yeah, I've been declaring, I've been praying about this for a long time. When we did a fasting thing at church in January, that was one of my main things that was on there of like, yes, God, this is what we're doing in 2020. And when everything started to fall apart, was like, no, I'm still, kind of keeping the faith, keeping the hope and all of that. But by the time we got to May of 2020, all of that there was no pulse on my plans. They had seemed to all die. Um, and some died a slow death, some a fast death, and some just, crumbled. But there was nothing for me, literally. It seemed like there was completely nothing for me to do, um, nothing that seemed tangible that my plans were actually going to work or go somewhere. And I think that's where my downfall began of just like, okay, God, um, there were certain things I prayed for, certain things that I thought were signs from God that I said, yes, this is the path that God wants me to take. But it seemed like everything else has fallen apart. What is that about? Like, what's going on? And indeed, I was angry at God too. Like, I was so mad that this had happened, that it seemed like he had just said, like one of those friends who says, hey, let's go to town. And, somehow you get in a bus, and on your way to town, your friend says, I'm not coming anymore. And you're already like halfway to town. That kind of felt like it, like in the middle of the journey, God has just left. And so between that space and now, there's been a lot of deconstructing that I feel like that's been going on within me. And part of it is kind of like what you were saying, Willson, about expectation versus our hope, our actual hope in Jesus. And as I was thinking through that, and I think when I saw that particular question about, okay, how do we draw the line? Where's the line between expectation and hope in Jesus as our person, as our hope person. And a friend said to me, my friend Tiseka today said to me that she's like, maybe the idea is that hope is actually relying on Jesus's wisdom. Jesus's wisdom that says, this is good for you or this is not good for you. Hope is relying on Jesus himself to say, yes, this is what you want, but if he says this is not good for you or this is not what I want for you now, that you can accept that his wisdom is above everything else. Whereas the expectation is us expecting something to happen, which means it has to happen. It's going to happen. It's going to be there. And where disappointment comes in is because those expectations didn't happen. The things that we wanted to happen didn't happen. But if we have hope, hope is actually relying on Jesus's wisdom. Wisdom that says, Jesus's wisdom that says, hey, that particular thing is not good for you right now. Or I don't want that for you. And you being able to accept that and say, okay, you don't want that for me, but that's where I thought we were going. Okay, great. So I'm going to wait on you. I'm going to look to you to show me which way then. If I got it wrong, then which way then, And so I think for me, that's where I'm beginning to draw, to see the line. And I think it's after having that conversation with my friend this morning that that actually became even more clear for me of, part of my own issues, even with God the past couple of months, is because what I expected to happen didn't happen. And somehow I was blaming God instead of going back and saying, okay, maybe this specific thing wasn't your plan. And also, maybe what did I do that contributed to this particular thing? And so starting to accept that, okay, maybe there was this that happened, or God actually just said, sure, the end goal is over there, but this is not the road that we're taking to get to that particular place. So I think that's where the distinction for me is coming in that the expectation being you just being stubborn about what's going to happen or what you want to happen, versus you relying on Jesus's wisdom, who will show you the way, who will tell you where to go, who will show you where to go. I know that makes sense in a way.
Wow, dude, you're throwing bars like I'm busy taking notes here. I'm like, yes, that's so good. So when you were speaking, I just remembered this crazy story. So I think 10, 15 years back, I really can't remember when this was, still a young boy. And so there was this huge conference that was happening at our church. And so I came in and this lady was preaching. I mean, like, that was a huge national conference. I didn't even know people who were there, most of them. And so I walk into the church and this lady is preaching. Now, I can't remember all the other stuff she talked about, but I still remember this one thing that she said. It was quite funny when she said it, but it has stuck with me. So she said, it's better to be in the fire with God than to be outside with Nebuchadnezzar. So she was preaching about, the whole Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar, whatever, that story. And why I thought about that was, I think no one wants to be in the fire. Everyone wants to be outside, dining with the king and things going according to plan, right? But then this thought around trusting Jesus and his wisdom, that wherever he is, that's the best place for me to be. So I might not like where I am, but if he is there, then that's the place that I need to be. I don't want to be anywhere else rather than be where he is, And I think what happens is, normally during a difficult time, it's so easy to lose sight of the fact that he's there.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to start thinking that, oh, God, why have you forsaken me? Where are you in all this? But the truth of the matter is he's right there. He's present and he's working. And I like the analogy that you gave of being on a minibus and you're going to town, and all of a sudden your friend calls and says, I'm not coming, when you are halfway going there. And like you say, that's how you felt. And I felt that same way too, where I just feel like, oh Jesus, I thought we're doing this thing together, then you just dropped me somewhere in the
Yeah.
middle, what's going on,
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think the truth in that is this: Jesus is present in the middle, just as he's present in the beginning and present at the end. Because I think it's easy to discern his activity normally at the beginning of something or at the end. And the Bible talks about him being the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning and the end, the author and the finisher. So I think even within our minds, it's easy to understand, it's easy to see what he's doing at the beginning and the end, because we're so used to that analogy. But then what we tend to forget is that if he's the beginning and the end, it also means he feels anything in between the beginning and the end. So he is there in the middle. And so I think I'm just finding comfort in having that thought that even if I'm halfway in the minibus and my friend calls and says, you know what, I'm not coming anymore, just knowing that Jesus is here with me in this moment, then there is no other place that I would rather but be there, because he is busy working out all things for my good. And I think that's an amazing truth. So thank you for sharing that. I'm so excited. I'm like, yeah, because this is so good.
Yeah.
This is so good.
Yeah.
I see we have a hand here on Zoom. Marisa is raising her hand. I'm going to open up for questions in a bit. Just now, I'll also be checking our Facebook feed to see if there are any questions or comments that are coming through. But yeah, while I check the Facebook feed, maybe Marisa, you want to say something? You want to come in or ask your question if you have a question?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. It wasn't really a question. I think it was more of it's what I've always wanted to hear, because I think I was going through the same thing. So I was more like clapping hands to thank you for, being that messenger, because that word spoke to me. So it's more of a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Marisa, for that. I mean, this is what we do. We do this just to have these honest conversations and share our struggles, our everyday struggles, because I think the other thing is, I think there's so much Superman Christianity that goes around, where people don't want to talk about their pains, their struggles. So that's why we do this, just to be real and to just share, and hopefully through our experiences and our thoughts, someone out there can get something good. So glad to hear that. All right, so Theo, let me come back to you. I was just checking our Facebook feed to see if we have any live questions. We don't have. So I want us to talk a little bit more about the idea of healing, right? Which I mentioned earlier, that you prayed about that last Sunday, and I really felt that. How do you heal from disappointment? Because right now, I mean, as we are speaking, people that are tuning in or people that are going to listen to this podcast, people are going through different kinds of situations, different kinds of disappointments. So how do you heal from that? Number one. And then I think we'll address the other part of the question later. So let's start with that. How do you start finding your way out of that disappointment?
Yeah. I think when it comes to the healing part, this is something that kind of has been with me for a while. The idea that when disappointment happens, it's like a wound that hits you. It's like scraping your knee, like falling down and scraping your knee. That's how disappointment kind of is on the heart. And so because it is a wound, you need to tend to it, I once, well, it was last year, I went through a training called trauma healing training. And one of the examples that my trainer used to like to say, give an example of, was the idea that if you fall down and you hurt your leg, and it's probably like a deep cut, if you just stay with it, it will probably, start smelling. It might go bad, lots of things might happen within the infections and all of that. So in order for you to actually get better, you need to start paying attention to that particular wound. You need to maybe go to the hospital, clean that wound up, cover that wound up, and all of those things. So I think in the same way that disappointment is like that, it is like hurting yourself physically. And because it is a wound, it needs to be cared for. It needs to be cared for. It needs to be acknowledged, I think, first of all. It needs to be acknowledged. And part of acknowledging the disappointment is kind of what I said before, of like when I got to a point of like accepting my circumstance and being like, hey, I'm actually in a place of helplessness. Because I think something that goes around in the church a lot, and at least that was kind of my upbringing in a way in the church, is that somehow if you say, oh no, things are not going well, then somehow you don't have faith. Then somehow you are not trusting God, if you actually say that out loud. But the truth is that if we can't actually acknowledge the pain we're going through out loud, it doesn't help anyone. It doesn't solve the issue. The issue will still be just there. There comes a point when we need to actually accept it. And I think that's part of the healing process, is acknowledging that there is a pain there, that there is a wound there. And I think something that there's this guy, Peter Scazzaro, who wrote the book Emotionally Healthy Spiritually. And one of the things he said in the book was ignoring emotions is like turning our back on reality. Listening to our emotions ushers us into reality, and reality is where we meet God. So it's
wow, that's so good. No, Theo, just
well,
pause and repeat that again, because that's so good.
okay. It
That's
says
so good.
ignoring emotions is turning our back on reality. Listening to our emotions ushers us into reality, and reality is where we meet God. So
Wow.
that's something that's kind of been hitting me as well, of we need to accept the circumstances that we are in. We need to accept things like COVID-19. It's here. It's disrupted our lives. We need to accept that. There's a new way of life that's happening because of this whole pandemic, and we have to accept that. Maybe the story is my business failed because because of how the year is going, because of COVID. Accept that. And I think part of accepting it is where, like you're saying, we come back into reality, and reality is where we meet God. Because sometimes it's as if we play around like God is afraid of our realities. Like somehow he's gonna look at me and see, oh, Theo's disappointed with this, and run the other way. But it's like, no, God meets us in our reality. God accepts our reality and says, hey, if you can acknowledge that you are disappointed, I can work with that. Because it's the same thing as going to the hospital and the doctor asks you of like, hey, so what's the problem? Where's the ailment? And all you say is, no, I'm good, I'm fine. But physically you're like shaking, you're vomiting and stuff like that. It's like the doctor can't do much to help you if you won't tell him what the actual problem is. And I think that's part of something that I've been kind of trying to do more of, is acknowledge, especially when I feel that disappointment heavily. And it's like, hey, my heart is heavy today, God, because once again, I'm remembering the circumstances I'm in, and it's not pretty. I don't like it. I've been hurt and I don't like it. And that's okay, because that's the place where God meets you. And I guess going back to that paradox we were talking about earlier, that I think in me letting go and saying, I don't have hope, I'm done, was where now God was able to meet me and be like, okay, now I can start working with you. Now we can start, helping you move on, helping you get to the next step, because I was able to acknowledge that there is a problem, that I am in a fix, that I am in a bit of a tough situation, but also allowing yourself to then feel and process that. Because sometimes we can acknowledge and say, I'm feeling a pain, but then we want to ignore that pain. We want to push down that pain. We want to suppress that pain. But nobody ever found healing by suppressing pain. You know, we have to acknowledge it and get help for it and allow ourselves to actually feel it. So it's okay to sit down for a moment and wallow in it and just be like, you know what, all I can do right now is cry about this situation because it's not fun and I hate it and it's been hard and it's not changing. I've been waiting for it to change and it's not changing. And that's okay too, because again, that's the reality. And in reality is kind of where God meets you. So yeah, back to a long way to get back to the point of the healing part. I say we need to heal from disappointment, because disappointment is like a wound. It is like falling down and scraping your knee.
Wow. Dude, like I was saying, you're just dropping bars today, you know. So you say a lot of interesting things about the analogy of the wound. I think that's really interesting, and it makes it very relatable to really understand that disappointment is a wound just like any other. And I mean, just listening to that, I'm also realized that I think a lot of times maybe in the pursuit of being strong, or not giving in to disappointment, I have failed to acknowledge that I'm hurt, and and as a result, I've never really processed the pain that comes with that. So yeah, thanks for that. Now there is a comment that I want to read out from Emma, and I think it's something that a lot of us also struggle with, just finding that distinction and drawing the line between the two. So I want you to respond to that as well. It's really not a question, but it's that there is a question within that comment, I would assume.
Yeah.
So she says, I feel like there is a cool and important distinction between acknowledging or accepting reality. For example, your business has failed, it's that is what has happened. And rolling over or giving up because reality is painful. Sometimes I feel like we think accepting a hard reality is the same as giving up hope, which is I think where a lot of us are. Sometimes we just feel like accepting that reality is the same as giving up hope. And so she was saying it's awesome that you are mentioning that accepting is the first step to dealing with the hard reality, not the last step of giving up. So maybe I'll throw in a question then to say, what's the dividing line again between maybe accepting this reality and actually giving up? How do you distinguish between the two?
I think it's a very excuse me, it's a very fine line, and the distinction can be quite hard between the two, because also it depends on, at least I think it depends on circumstances that a person's going through, what has led you to that point of actually giving up. Because I think in how, for example, my own situation differed in the idea of accepting this is where it is, that it was like giving up, but also not giving up at the same time, if you get what I mean. But I think there is that, in that giving up is just throwing the towel, that I will never, like, this will never get better, that there will never come a day when I will be over this. I think maybe that's where accepting reality in a sense of defeat, of it, things will never change, and I will just never change. That is different from saying, I've accepted that this is the place I'm in, and then starting to figure out how, first of all, how you got there, and also what are the things that you need to kind of uncover. Because I think part of me saying, I'm done with hope. I'm done trying to hope. I'm done trying to do anything. Helped me accept my reality, accept the place where I'm at. But I think that the step that I also took is now the uncovering of that disappointment of like, I've accepted I'm disappointed, but instead of just like, oh yeah, I'm disappointed and that's it, and that's my excuse for everything, like, oh no, why are you not doing this here? I'm disappointed, I'm done, but actually saying, okay, I am disappointed, but how did I get here? What's keeping me here? What are the things that I'm feeling pain over? What are the things that I'm actually I can verbalize and say, I feel hurt here, or I feel hurt there, or this went wrong here and this went wrong there. I think maybe that's where the distinction is, that if you give up, giving up would be, creating disappointment as an excuse for everything in life, for just being like, no, it's because I was disappointed, and then basi, that's just your answer. But I think the part where you're not giving up is actually saying, okay, this is my situation, but I'm trying to figure out why I'm here, what's happening within me, what are the feelings, what are the emotions within me. I think that's part of maybe the distinction. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah, it does. And maybe just to add on to that, for me, I normally I use this explanation to kind of draw the dividing line. And I would say the distinction, or the dividing line between giving up and maybe accepting reality could be giving up control of the situation and giving into Jesus' control. I don't know if that makes sense. Because for me, I think it's kind of more around giving up would come for me when I'm in a place whereby I've tried to do it on my own, and I failed and I'm disappointed, and then I'm kind of like, I can't do it anymore, and then what you do after that is what matters. So for me, the distinction, or how maybe you can overcome that issue of maybe giving up because you're disappointed, would be trying to give up control of the situation yourself, to say, you know what, I've tried to do it, or maybe I'm disappointed and I can't kind of figure a way out of this myself, but then give into something bigger. So you give up control, but you give into Jesus and his control and his wisdom, and just say, you know what, I'm going to trust you with my disappointment and with where I'm at right now, and trust that you will guide me out of it, and navigate me out of the situation. So again, I don't know if that helps, but that's also how I always try to look at it. Yeah, man, I mean, great conversation. I'm really enjoying this. Now, obviously, we're almost running out of time. I want us to close this, and maybe just to wrap this up, just to have a chat around, you've talked about healing, how do you, start finding your way out of that. But I also just wanted to find out from you, are there any other, say, practical tips that you have, practical things that you do? They could even be biblical things that you do, or just, practices that you have learned through your work or through your life experiences, that you have used to actually get out of it, out of maybe a state of disappointment, or out of that lull or that slump. So over to you.
I think my biggest thing is, when it comes to, I'd say a biblical thing, is Psalm 13. Psalm 13 is my favorite psalm of all time. It's literally my favorite chapter of all time, because I think it always manages to explain me when I can't explain myself. And part of it is because in the beginning of the beginning of the chapter is David just whining. He's like, God, where are you? Do you not see me? God, will you not, fight for me? What is happening? Look at my enemies, they're excelling and all of that. And then right in the middle, he goes, oh, come save me, you know, come for my rescue, come do this for me. And then in the end, he ends the whole chapter by saying, but I trust in your everlasting love. And for me, it was always just a very weird thing of like, dude, what? Like, how, like, it's such a very mixed feeling type of chapter. But part of it is that I always think to myself that David was onto something because, one, he acknowledged the idea that, God, I don't feel like you're here. I don't feel like you're doing anything. Like, where are you? Did you somehow leave? Like, what's up? What's going on? Don't you see my pain? He acknowledged all of those feelings. And then he goes on to ask for help. He still asks for help and says, yo, come to my rescue, okay? Just come to my rescue. And then he lastly says, I trust in your everlasting love. I trust in you. And so that's kind of part of it of, in the end, he goes back to the one who he knows him, to the one who he knows can rescue him out of everybody. He's the one that can rescue him. And that's kind of part of it. Practically, I would say, one, acknowledge your feelings, but also ask for help. And I think that's something that sometimes we can't do, or we don't want to do, because maybe it may make us look cheap somehow, some way, but we need to be able to say, hey, we need to be able to say, you know what, I need help. I need help from this. I need help. I need someone to come help me. And I think that's been the big thing for me. I've had friends that I could call upon. I've had people that I could go voice myself out to, just lay myself out there and cry my eyes out and be like, yo, things are not okay, and I actually need your help to get out of this fix. I need, even if they can't necessarily help me get out of it, but actually help me untangle the things that are going on within my mind, and help me start seeing the truth. But also, I think one of the things that I've realized is, when you're in disappointment, something that actually gets to us is lies. There's a lot of lies that come with disappointment. And I think for me, some of those lies had been things like, oh, you won't go anywhere with this, you know, like you will never amount to anything. Or things like, you're not worthy. And being able to identify those lies and be like, this came in because I'm feeling this way, because I've been disappointed by ABC. And so I think those are some of the ways that can actually help us get to a healing place. But most importantly, like David did, is to go back to Jesus and say, hey, you're the only one. Because truly, he is the only one that can heal us, that can help us to heal. So I think at the end of the day, it's, even when you've done all of that acknowledging, done all of that getting help, go ahead and go back to him. Because ultimately, like you said in the beginning, he's our hope. And without him, it's all dark. There's nothing there.
Wow. You're preaching good. Well, yeah, man, Psalm 13, I was just listening to that and thinking through that whole process and the transition in the chapter. Yeah, and I think it's a beautiful chapter. So I just want to encourage anyone listening in, maybe you're going through a difficult time and you're feeling disappointed. Just want to challenge you, read Psalm 13 and just throw yourself into that scripture, and may you find healing, may you find peace, and above all, may you have the courage to be honest with yourself and honest with God as well about how you feel, because God is not offended by our questions. He's not offended by our mixed feelings, but rather he wants us to come as we are, in whatever state we find ourselves in, and be honest with him, because he's our Father and he's always ready to listen. Theo, before we close, I just feel that it will be such a great time maybe for you to pray. Just pray over people watching, people tuning in. We're gonna listen to this who are going through disappointment right now. So yeah, maybe just pray over everyone watching tonight.
Sure. Um, Dear Father, we are grateful for just this evening and this conversation, God. And Lord, realizing that there are a lot of us that started out the year feeling like we were on top of the world, but somehow we're at the bottom of the barrel just a few months in. And God, it almost just feels like you left right in the middle of the journey. But Father, I pray that God, you would reach out to us, that Lord, you would show us how good you still are, even in our circumstances, that you have been good always and you will continue to be good. That Father, you are here to heal us, that you are not afraid of these things we feel, that you are not afraid of the things that have hurt us, the things that have painted, the disappointment that has come into our lives, God, but that you love us so much that you are here with us at the bottom of the barrel. You are here reaching out to us, saying you love us still, saying you are ready to work with us to get out of this, that you knew this would happen before it happened. And so, God, you are here. Father, I pray that may there be a restoration, God, of hope. A restoration of God, of hope in our hearts, of hope in our minds, of hope everywhere, God. That, Lord, may we see you even in the little mundane things, God, of our everyday today, God. May we see you. May we trust you. May we know that you are still here. May we tangibly know that you are here and you are here for us. We thank you, Father, and we bless you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Man, thank you so much, Theo, for being here and for that prayer. And it was amazing having you and just talking about this. I feel so like I have a burden lifted off my shoulders, and I'm praying and hoping that whoever has been tuning in has been blessed just as much as or even more than I have been blessed by this. So thank you so much. Always a pleasure having you, and I hope to have you on the show again soon.
Yeah, I hope to be back. I hope you'll invite me back. Honestly, this has been good for me too. And I think, like I said before, I am still in that season of having to deal and heal from disappointment. And I think speaking about things like this has helped me also process a little bit. So I'm definitely grateful that this happened tonight. So thank you for inviting me into this conversation today.
Awesome. Thank you to everyone who tuned in via Zoom and via Facebook. And in case you didn't know, we go live every week on Wednesday, 7 p.m. So tune in again next week. We'll be having our next episode of Candid Conversations. If you would want to listen to the podcast, we have our podcast live on Anchor FM, Spotify, Google Podcast, and any other major podcast platform where you get your platforms. So just search for Candid Conversations and you should be able to find the podcast right there. And you can also tune in or watch this podcast on our YouTube channel. Search for Candid Conversations. You should be able to see it. So thank you once again for joining us, and hope to see you guys all again next week when we have another episode of Candid Conversations.